at the end of the day, if you do something that makes you feel good, that's not enough.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
enough. So, I think what hunters are doing by buying ammunition and firearms and licenses, because that's also part of how the funding model works, is something. But it's similar to paying dues to a land conservancy that's buying land. And that's something, right? And that's good. But if you really care, like if you're fired up enough to be yelling at people who are doing it the wrong way, whatever way that is, like because they're hunting or because they're not hunting, then what I would say is, why aren't you fighting to have legislation for real funding, like constant funding? Like, I don't know, I've heard talk about backpack or binocular tax or whatever, but maybe we just need an income tax. So because everybody's benefiting from the conservation of lands and the protection of waters. So maybe everybody should be paying for it.
This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. Thanks for tuning back in today. I'm joined by a very special guest, Jen Davis. Jen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's Wednesday, so we're halfway to the weekend.
Halfway there. Only a few more days, and it's time to go fish or hunt or something or whatever we can get into. So, you have a list of activities, to put it mildly, that you enjoy in the outdoors. But it's all had to start somewhere. And, for me, that was just, I grew up in the outdoors, but I didn't really grow into like this being the most passionate thing of my life until I was a little bit older. So what was the spark for you that drew you into someone who's just obsessed with the outdoors?
My stomach. So
all right.
It's all about getting into food. I grew up exposed to the outdoors, but I was what you could describe as indoorsy as a kid and a teenager a little bit. And so when I became an adult and started really asking hard questions about my food, it got me outside, learning how to grow it, learning how to collect it, learning how to hunt it.
Yeah. Well, food is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I just made a post today on Instagram of me holding a shark that I caught in the ocean and me like turning it into a delicious like Cajun shark sandwich. And like for me, that's what it's all about. I love that. I love the memory of, harvesting my own food, the adventure of the hunting, and then also knowing that in the end of the day, I tried to be as ethical as I could, hunting or fishing for this animal. I tried to just like least amount of harm to the animal, and also knowing that my food is not been touched by a million hands and covered in God knows what is out there. So with food, you hunt and fish and stuff like that, but with the foraging and growing your own food, that's something I don't have a ton of experience with. What do you do when you forage? Like, are you talking mushrooms? Are you talking any sort of edible plants? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, well, it really started, I started wanting to eat organic, and then I realized that wasn't really cutting it for me. So I started eating local, and then from local farmers. And I noticed that I would pull weeds in the garden, and then I would, on my way home, I would pick up some spring greens in the grocery store. And I realized that what I was picking up in the grocery store looked a lot like what I was throwing away. And I started asking questions about what is edible that's out there and how do I figure that out, And so when I forage, it's a lot like small game or upland hunting, where you're like walking and your senses are really heightened and you're just looking for a different quarry, really. And I really, I liked learning the seasons. Like, when do I get spring greens? When do I get nuts? When do I go out for this kind of mushroom or that kind of mushroom? So yeah, it's a lot like hunting. Your quarry just isn't running away. It's just not there certain times of the year.
Well, I have a lot of respect for people who can do that, because I spend a lot of time of my free time trying to understand, animal habitat and the way that animals operate in that habitat, and, you know, what it means in certain times of the year for different animals and fish species and deer and you know, all these different animals act differently in different times of the year. And I really enjoy that. But people who are able to differentiate plants and mushrooms, they just, like, to me, there's a whole new level of expertise, because we hear our whole life mushrooms will kill you if you eat them. They're dangerous. Don't even look at them. You'll die immediately. So is it as bad as people make it out to be, or is it just like once you start to understand them, is it kind of as easy as like understanding like, oh, it's the rut deer are going to be going absolutely bonkers? Like, is it on a similar thing, or is it a little more detailed?
Gosh, yes and no. So if you think about how you would describe or how you would talk about what is the difference between a cucumber and a zucchini, for example, they are very similar produce items. And, you know, when you look at them in the grocery store, you have no question in your mind. You can easily distinguish them. Yeah. And finding food in the wild is very much the same way. You just slowly learn those plants. And so as long as you don't think you can just show up in the woods and suddenly know what's safe and what's not, and you're willing to take the time to sort of dig in there. But I came to hunting as an adult, which I think from listening to the podcast, you did as well. Yep. And so there's a learning curve there. And if you can find people who know already, who can sort of take you under their wing and mentor you and show you the way, that speeds things up quite a bit. So it's not that different. There are different kinds of details that you look for. And I think that if you do both, they can inform each other. So I feel like learning to identify plants has been excellent for scouting for deer, for example. Mm-hmm. Like I now know how to identify a lot of the plants that deer like, just because I started learning them when I was learning about food for humans.
Yeah. So. And you know, it's all comes full circle, because, you know, so many people I've talked to have said the same thing. Like, yes, understanding animal habits is one thing, but if you understand things down to like an ecological level, like the plants they're eating, if you can differentiate those plants, I mean, you're setting yourself up for success. And I have a background in studying like human culture and anthropology. I just love learning about like distant human past, like, and in our modern world, we've lost so much of the skill that used to just keep us alive day to day. Like if you were to drop me off in the woods right now, even with everything I've learned over the last 5-6 years of hunting and you know, a lifetime in the outdoors, essentially, I still would probably drop dead. Maybe not as fast as some people, but like I know enough to keep myself alive for a while. But like other than that, like I don't know how to make a bow out of stuff in the woods. I could make a rudimentary spear or some sort of like fishing stuff and maybe some cordage, start a fire if I'm lucky. But other than that, I think we've lost so much. Do you have any interest in like learning about our roots? Because like that's what we're essentially doing, is relearning what we would have already known as a child 150 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like as I gained skills, I started to ask questions about where those skills came from, right? Like, why is this information not information I have? Even just about canning, right? And then stepping back into more and more primitive tools and skills. And learning those skills is super interesting to me. I still want to use the most efficient method that I can use myself. Personally, I tend toward that for hunting, and even foraging, right? Like I map out where I find things on Onyx so that I know, right, where to go. Like, where did I find those mushrooms last year? Because those tools are really valuable. And I think that our primitive ancestors would use them if they had them.
Oh, absolutely.
But learning, you know, asking questions about our food and where it comes from really begs the question of where did we used to get it from? How have we interacted with the natural landscape in ways that we've lost touch with?
And there's so much out there. If we actually weren't like essentially forced to be in like the day in, day out life that you have to live it as an American, like, or anyone in the world, essentially at this point in time, like we're under this like we're in this capitalist system, and like we have to work to make money to like afford land. You can't just live on the land anymore. So you have to be able to like pay your taxes and all this stuff that, you know, we didn't have to do a long time ago. But we also, on the trade-off, aren't having to kill each other all the time over like minor disputes in the woods, you know. So like there's a pretty decent trade-off. Back to your point of if our ancestors had this technology, they absolutely would use it. I mean, if you like, I like to put things in perspective, and I've said on recent episodes and other episodes in the past, like I'm at the point now where I'm trying to kind of learn as much as I can without technology to aid me as much as possible, just so I have like a base level, especially since I'm still very early in my hunting life. I mean, 5 years isn't a long time. It's like it barely scratched the surface. So I'm trying to set myself up to like understand things like you do on an ecological level with plants and animals and habits before I really start using a ton of technology to assist me, so I can always fall back on knowledge rather than technology. And the thing is, like, perspective wise, if you were to go back when they invented the bow, like people were not like, oh, I'm not going to use that thing. I can kill deer so much easier. And then the same thing with the gun. Like when that came out, they're sitting there like, this is newfangled junk. Like I could shoot something at 150 yards. Like, are you kidding me? This rules. Right. And like we're to the point now where I think we're like almost going backwards, because we're like, we have all the technology at our disposal, but a lot of us don't know shit about animals. So it's like, it's a funny paradox in my brain. But, you know, you are involved in a lot of organizations as well. And I think that's really awesome. And it's very important. I've always been kind of a loner. I don't really haven't in the past gotten involved in a lot of organization stuff. And I'm starting to see the importance of that now. And I think a lot of the stuff that's happening when this like newer movement awakening of outdoors, and especially women in the outdoors, is awesome. I was lucky enough to interview Renee Thornton. She runs, the Wild Sheep Foundation. They have their branch with Women Hunt. And I learned so much about women getting out of the outdoors and hunting as adults and stuff. And I think it's awesome. And you're part of Artemis, or you're involved with Artemis. Yeah. So from what I've looked online, it's very similar, and it has this awesome conservation ethic on their website that they talk about. So what is Artemis, I guess, at a base level for people that don't know? And then what do you get out of it? Because it just sounds like such a cool program.
Well, so Artemis is like an arm of the National Wildlife Federation. So the National Wildlife Federation is made up of conservation organizations that are blended between non-consumptive, for lack of a better term, and consumptive organizations across the country. And then each of their organizations, like Michigan's is MUCC. So MUCC is an affiliate of NWF. And MUCC is made up of conservation organizations within the state of Michigan. So Artemis is, rather than being one of those state level affiliates, is sort of a countrywide sort of arm of Artemis that aims to get women into conservation in both advocacy and the sporting lifestyle, getting outdoors and getting connected with hunting and fishing, and community of women who are also doing that. There have been traditions of introduction to hunting, so like recruitment level activities at various different state organizations, especially like for us, we have Becoming an Outdoors Woman. Many states have a similar program that's like, here's how you get into the thing. Yeah. Artemis sort of takes that next rung on the ladder. It does help women get into hunting and fishing and getting outdoors, but it also fills that gap of building community and retaining people who've gotten into hunting and angling and other conservation activities. So it's a really amazing organization, and I feel like it's really building momentum now. It started out west, and it's sort of populated across the country, and women are starting to hear about it and come together. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, and even in history books and textbooks and a lot of stuff you read, and even just in general, I think hunting is associated with like this hyper masculine thing. It's like online, there are a bigger presence of women nowadays, but in the past, like even from stuff I see day to day on Instagram or something, it's just like dudes. Why do you think it's important for women to get into this? Because I mean, it's an equal to opportunity employer. We're all equally bad at it when we start. So
Yeah, I feel like a lot of women, if they, there's such a variety of backgrounds that we all come from, right? Some women were taken out with their dad and their granddad or their uncle or somebody, or their mother and grandmother took them out hunting or fishing. But a lot of women didn't have that experience. If there was a boy child to be taken out, a lot of women would, when they were children, the girls were left at home. Mm-hmm. And so there are many women who feel like they haven't had those opportunities, or who just want an affinity space, a space where they can feel free to be themselves completely. I sort of think of it as similar to the way that some men have a deer camp that they wouldn't particularly want women at. And so I think that if we can think about how we like to have spaces where we feel comfortable and we don't have to feel like we're tempering what we're saying around a specific group of people who feel really comfortable with us, and then how other people might want that as well. And so I think having a space that builds community for women, even from various different backgrounds, I think is really valuable. But beyond that, I think opening up the outdoors really intentionally to everyone. So whatever those spaces look like, if we could have more of those spaces that are even diverse spaces with lots of different groups, spaces specifically for LGBTQ members of the outdoors, every group that you can think of, I think the more ways we have to build community, the better, because we'll just be getting more and more people out there.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think that there's such a huge debate nowadays in the outdoors with inclusion and all of this. It's not even just the outdoors, it's in general and on a public national level. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time. And to be honest, I am tired of hearing about it, because I'm like, this is so obvious. Like, yes, like everybody should be allowed to be out here and do all this stuff. So I know I've been down that rabbit hole a few times with a lot of people, and I think it's just interesting. And I'm glad that people stand up and take a stand against their things. But then it just starts infighting with everyone. Like, it's a lot of groups that are separate and they build their own, and then they start infighting with other groups that are different, but they're still fighting for the same thing. And I'm just like, listen, I want everybody to go outside. I don't care who you are. Get the hell out there. We need to conserve this stuff. Like, I will take everybody out with me if I can. Let's go. So, I think that's my end goal, is like, the more we're arguing in and amongst ourselves as an outdoors community, even though we are on the track to do the right thing and help, we're still hindering progress. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way my brain goes about it. Like, we need to conserve. We need to get more people excited about the outdoors. And we're not going to do that by fighting with each other about stuff that we all want to do. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm off mark, but.
Yeah, I think so. I think ultimately the question comes up of, how do you want to get outside? And if you want to get outside in a space that has everybody, in a space where you're alone, in a space where you just have one specific kind of person who mentors you, I don't really care what it is, but you need to be able to help get you into the outdoors if you haven't been there before. I feel like anything we can do as outdoors people to help facilitate making that happen for people is the best. I really think that if you're not already connected and plugged into some kind of outdoor activity, finding a way to make that happen or to allow that to happen is where my heart is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. And hey, everybody, thanks for checking out this episode. If you feel like you're getting something out of it, go down in the link below and buy me a coffee. The Aptitude Outdoors podcast is fully self-funded by me. So if you're digging it, I'm just throwing out a tip jar, and I appreciate you listening. Let's dive right back into this episode.
It sounds like we had maybe a similar path into ultimately ending up on food. I mean, that's what hunting is. That's what foraging is. That's what fishing is. When I think of that, I think of, this is what I'm going to be eating. And I'm not sure the argument's there that we're saving money doing this because I bought a lot of fishing equipment this year. So
Probably not.
yeah. But the path that I had was I fell in love with outdoor recreation as a young adult, like 19 through 25, what I will say. I absolutely just went all in. I mean, I backpacked the Appalachian Trail, and after that, I got into kayaking, long distance kayaking, anything like trail running, anything that I could get outside, I was in. Archery, I took up archery even before the thought of hunting crossed my mind. And, you know, anything. If somebody said we're going outside to do this, I was there. It doesn't matter what it is. If it was paddleboarding, I don't even like paddleboarding, to be honest with you. I would go. And it's just like, it inevitably took me down this path of, wow, I really love this. And then it was like, when the outdoors, I've found in my experience that there's kind of two camps. There's what we refer to as jokingly the granola, crunchy hippie types who are like, which I love those people. I know those people. I hang out with those people around here. Like they're my friends. They like to go outside and camp and hang out and have campfires and eat s'mores and drink. Totally cool. I love all that stuff too. And then some people branch out and they go the route of hunting, fishing, consumptive use, which I ended up as at this point because I'm a curious person and I have to follow every rabbit hole I come across. So to me, in my personal experience and personal thought, and I may get crap for this, like I feel like when you get to that level of like understanding the full spectrum of like the food aspect and the hunting, and you understand all of the conservation stuff, you kind of get to this like pinnacle outdoors person. Like you love all of the things at the top of the pyramid all the way down. And it sounds like that's what you are going down that same road as me. You're just like, this is so awesome. And do I like killing stuff? Not necessarily. It's like not my favorite thing, but like I understand that as a human, that's been part of our heritage for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. And then also, you know, it's just part of the life cycle of Earth. Like things have to die for you to live, whether it's a bug on a soy plant or a deer in the middle of fall when you're hunting. So what took you down that path in the longest question I've ever asked? What took you down that path from like, I like recreating to where you're at now and being super involved in conservation, hunting, foraging, all of that stuff?
Mm-hmm. I think when I really realized what an intensely valuable resource we had at our disposal, I even almost hesitate to call it a resource, right? Because I feel like that means that the implication is we take. But that the importance of habitat, the amazingness of the natural habitat around us, and the funding for that, and how that comes from the sporting types of conservation. When I realized that it wasn't meeting up. The habitat wasn't quite as much as it really should be, and that the funding wasn't keeping pace with what we needed. My desire to both help people on the path that I went down, right? So I did a little bit of self-education and collected some education from organizations around me. And I wanted to be able to help other people do that so they could see the value that I saw in this awesome resource that we have, so that they would also want to protect it and fund it and get connected. But then even just children who, I don't care why they love the outdoors, I just want them to love it, because we can't really ask them to defend it if they don't understand why, if they don't have like a visceral connection to why. When I was younger, before I got into hunting and fishing, I thought I was an environmentalist. Like I bought a subscription. I had a couple of those like address labels sent to me to one of the conservation organizations. Yeah. Like maybe a tote. And I wasn't really involved. I didn't call my senator or my representatives. I didn't research these laws. I didn't understand how the land was being funded at all. And I thought that was enough. And it wasn't until I got like this deep connection, like my food my body is made out of the food that I eat. And the food that I eat is coming from this place. And these animals need all of these amazing pieces of the habitat in order to be healthy. And I want them to be healthy from a purely selfish standpoint, because that's what I'm made out of, because that's what I eat. And so, like, once it really came full circle like that for me, I think it was a no-brainer to put in as much time and energy as I could into these conservation organizations and teach other people how to love this amazing resource that we have.
Yeah, and I don't even feel like it's a selfish thing, because like that is what we are as human beings. Like we have this idea in the whatever century we're in, that we're separated from nature. We've evolved to this point as human beings where we're just completely out of the loop, and we've built cities, and like it's total bullshit, because when you think like that, you're detached so far from the reality of the world, because like even someone like me who lives in farm country, you got people in the city, even where I live is like 25 minutes from the city limits, essentially. People that never leave the city, they live in this rat race, and they think they're in this safe paradise. It's like there are hundreds of millions of acres of people making sure that you can eat every day. And so like that is the natural world. I mean, as much as farming has been commercialized and made into this huge industry, we're growing food that is part of the earth. Like if a single part of that were to collapse, we're all screwed. Even if you're like the best hunter on earth, like there's just like if habitat's shrinking, if animals are dying and going extinct at rapid rates, like what do you think the end outcome is? Like the stripping of habitats and ecological areas of like that are just have been evolved over millions and millions of years to like coexist with one another. We're just losing them at a rapid rate. And it's like, my goal in life is to get people to understand that. Like, you don't have to want to go hike 20 miles into the backcountry and hunt something to understand this concept. Like, we are so still part of this natural world that it is like mind blowing when you think about it. Every part of our body is dependent on everything, like even to our microbiome in our gut. It's like all part of the natural world. And I don't know how people, well, I do know how people can get that mindset, but like, I feel like, do you ever feel like you like are like when in the Matrix where they like take the pill and it's just like you wake up and you're like, holy shit, what the hell is going on out here? You look around the world and you're like, what are these people doing? Like, am I insane or are they insane? I don't know yet, honestly.
Yeah, no, I do. And it's funny because I think that, like I say that I want to connect people to nature, right? Because that's like what I want to do. But I only say it that way because people don't realize that we can't help but be connected to nature. Like we are, right? Every decision we make impacts the natural world because
I think mental connection is what
creatures.
you mean.
And yeah. To really be aware of that connection. And so, right, to wake them up, right? To get them to, see the Matrix.
Well, it's so wild. I mean, I probably sound like a psychopath to the majority of the world, but that's totally fine because like that's what we are. That's who we are as human beings. We're like attached whether we like it or not. And I hear arguments like, oh, well, we are part of the natural world and what we're doing is, part of like the way things are supposed to unfold. I'm like, I mean, that's one way to like shred any sort of responsibility of like having a conscious as like we're also are able to like think rationally and logically. Sometimes we try to, at least as humans. So it's like, I think, I don't know. To me, this is not a radical idea, but to someone that doesn't like or isn't into this stuff, I think it does sound radical. But it's like I don't know any other way to say it. Like I feel like everybody's nuts, and I'm the only one like seeing the world exists outside of like New York City or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, though.
Yeah. But so we'll switch subjects here. See some nice bows behind you on the wall.
Yeah.
I love archery. It is so cool. It's like my Zen moment of the day, even if it's like 5 or 10 shots in the middle of the day. Just like launching a projectile at a target is so fun. It looks like you have some more traditional stuff back there. So is that your preferred method?
So no, the bottom bow is mine, but there's like, here, I'll show you real quick. There's a whole bunch, and they're almost all my husband's because he's like the traditionalist.
That's sweet.
But we both have crossbows that we will use. I have a compound bow that I also use for hunting. My recurve bow, honestly, is mostly for getting connected with instinctive shooting and my intuition, and I use it when I work out. So it's like integrated it into what we call Archery Fit, our little workout routine. Archery
Fit. What is that? That sounds like something I would be into. Now you got to tell me.
Well, because of the pandemic, right? We hadn't been going to the gym, and so we were working out, finding different places outdoors to work out, and we were taking our kettlebells to the hiking trails with us and all that sort of stuff. And then it was not long before we thought, we could take our kettlebells to the archery range. So we go to the archery range and we'll do like, I don't know, 10 or 15 kettlebell swings and then shoot an arrow, and then another 10 or 15 and then shoot an arrow. And so that's just like, and then you do squats, or you'll do, I don't know, single arm raises or rows or whatever in between. And then, once you've done a full set, you can. And the shooting gets really wild toward the end because the cardio kicks in. You're just like, your arrows are not going where you think they should go, but it's still fun.
Well, I think that's really awesome, actually, because that's what it feels like when you're actually hunting and your heart is about to jump out of your throat because you're just so hyped up. And I got my first archery deer last year. And I knew that going in because I've gotten one with a shotgun before, and like the buck fever is no joke. Like it really feels like you're about to just die. And I was like mentally training myself for that over the course of the hunting season because I saw a ton of deer, and they would and your heart rate would get up, and I would tell myself, like, you need to calm down because you're gonna have to like precision shoot at this animal if it gets close enough. But I think that's a really good way to train for that. I mean, because you can't really simulate that anxiety you get when an animal comes up, and you got to like really focus hard and also try and calm yourself down. But I think that's a good simulation, and I might have to try that sometime. Go in the yard and just like run a mile at full speed, and then just grab my bow and realize how terrible I am.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Well, I had been practicing with the recurve all summer, and I took my compound bow out the last couple weeks, and I had to knock the dust off a little bit. Like I had gotten used to doing things a different way. I had to remember like, oh, right, I have to snap cleanly into the whisker biscuit, and I have to like really look at my sights because I was not used to it.
The compound bow is great, and there's so many camps of archery hunting that I don't really want to get down that rabbit hole because people get super just riled up about it, and it's like, listen,
I
it's
like
a skill.
everything. Yeah.
The reason you archery hunt is it extends your season 10,000 times longer, okay? That's the real reason. I'm never going to be a world-class archer, whatever. I'm doing it because it takes it from September 24th to like February here in Ohio. Like I get a long hunting season when it's cold and warm. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. But so you also, for your job, you say you're a recreational specialist.
Yeah, which sounds like a fake job.
Yeah, like I know people who do that here, and it is a fake job. You get to have fun all day. So like I don't want to hear it, okay?
It's hard to.
No, I did it for a season. What is that job like for people who don't know?
Yeah, so I actually started at the township as a park ranger, which was mainly picking up trash and opening and closing the parks. But then they quickly realized I was into nature, and they didn't have anybody doing nature programming. So they had me pinch in and help run a couple of guided hikes. We did a full moon hike. And when they had an opening, I applied, and they hired me on full time. So essentially what I'm doing is developing the nature programming for the township parks and rec department. And they kind of give me a little bit of free rein to come up with programs that I want to run. So we do a full moon hike every month. We do homeschool programs, which are just wildlife exploring. So we just teach them how to be observant. We go on little nature hikes together. I got archery certified with USA Archery. So once we get equipment, I can start running archery programs for the township. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. We work out of the senior center, so I get to help, run a little bit of bingo and a little bit of line dancing here and there. Also,
that sounds great.
Yeah, I helped build t-ball teams and soccer teams last year, but we have somebody else who came on who specializes in the sports stuff. So I'm not doing as much of that. But, it's just getting people connected with one another, getting people outdoors, all the kinds of things that I really love doing. So
essentially what you're saying is you had a passion, you dove in head first, and now you're doing it as a job.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
It's wild how that happens, isn't it? It's like people just don't believe that it happens, and it really does. I mean, I'm a firm believer, like if you're going to do something, you just got to dive in head first. Like I never thought I'd be doing this, but here we are. And, I think that job specifically is so important because that's the job that took me down this rabbit hole. Like I worked a summer doing that essentially at a park district around here. And you don't get certified as a seasonal worker, but you learn essentially, you get the certification from your team that you're working with without getting the paper. So, I learned all this awesome kayaking stuff and I use all of that to this very day. I built out my own fishing kayak and I go out and all the stuff I learned from that summer is still applicable to everyday life. So even if it's someone that's interested in the outdoors, like even taking a summer seasonal position is going to set you on a trajectory because you're going to learn so much in such a short amount of time and you never know where it's going to take you. So it's awesome.
Volunteer work too does that. I feel like the organizations I got involved with and the volunteer mentorship and that kind of thing is really, it fills in the resume in those holes where you weren't able to get into the career otherwise. I don't have a degree in hunting or recreation. I actually have a degree in sculpture.
Hey, I have an anthropology degree. So everybody always asks me why. And I was like, did you ever just want to learn stuff? Like everybody goes to college for I'm going to get this job. I never thought about that. I never went to college. I was like, I'm going to be an anthropologist. I was like, this stuff is so freaking interesting. And then I went and learned about it. And I didn't need a reason. So I don't know. I'm weird. I get that. I understand people. I know. I'm well aware. So the one thing that I saw you did was you're part of the Sporting Lead Free. And that is a thing I've been hearing more and more about. And I cannot say that I participate because I have a ton of lures, but why is that an issue for someone like me who is aware of it but doesn't know the relevance of why we shouldn't be using lead on everything?
Yeah, so that's a big one. So Sporting Lead Free is a non-political organization that just advocates for education and informed decision making. So they just present information about the potential issues with using lead, both in angling and in hunting, and alternatives. So they do a lot of testing of various different non-lead options and how they perform, especially with ballistics, and then put that information out for the public. So what I do with them is I'm an ambassador, so I just sort of help with the information side of things. And I've been testing different types of ammo for small game because I love to squirrel hunt, and there are not a lot of great options for non-lead for that. I'm trying out some new 22 megs this season. But otherwise it had been shotgun shells. But what happens with lead in the landscape is that it doesn't go away. It doesn't really disperse. So if an animal consumes it, like some birds will pick up little bits of shot to have in their crop, or if a fish picks it up off of the bottom of the river or the lake or whatever, it will just stay in them. And then the next animal that comes along and eats them is going to ingest that lead. And lead, there's no known safe level of lead for consumption. It is all toxic, no matter how much you have, it's considered toxic, and it's a neurotoxin, and it causes other health issues. And it doesn't just leave the body. It will just stay and cycle in. In humans, when you get lead poisoning, they actually have to take your blood through a cleaning machine and put it back into you. It's pretty
Sounds great. Sounds awesome.
I don't know how well that works, but I'm not a medical professional. But yeah, in order to help diminish the amount of lead that's on the landscape, it's important to think about alternatives that you can use so that when you inevitably lose that lure in the water, it's not leaving that lead in the landscape. And especially with hunting, when you send a projectile out, especially lead will fragment, and you'll get little tiny pieces all through the meat, all through the guts. And a lot of times you're leaving at least the gut pile out in the field, and scavengers will come and pick that up, including bald eagles. They've had huge problems with eagles and lead contamination in their system. And even if it's other like little mice and things like that, they're getting picked up by an owl later or something later, and then it's just cascading up the food chain. So if you can find good alternatives, it's awesome to be able to do that. I mean, shooting lead, especially if you've got a backstock, like we have, I think, a Rubbermaid tote in the closet that's full of 22 ammo that we picked up when it was scarce. It's all lead, and we use that at the range. We use that to practice and that kind of thing. But we're trying to transition. It's hard to make the full transition away from lead, but we're trying.
Life is hard, and we're out here doing larger-than-life things, whether it's pushing ourselves physically in the outdoors or mentally at work or in the podcast studio. Absolute Aid is here to help you focus, recover, and stay calm during your most intense moments. Absolute Aid, created by nature, made with science, for those who seek to do more.
Yeah, that's one of those things, and especially as, not only am I concerned with conservation, but I would also consider myself like an environmentalist too. Like I really am concerned about like environmental issues, especially here in the Great Lakes region. I mean, we have the algal bloom issue, which, I've done episodes on already, and we've got, invasive species, and we've just got microplastics in the Great Lake. And I mean, it's just the laundry list of anything you'll find anywhere. And I do worry about lead a little bit in our river. The Maumee River here is like the walleye capital of this general region. So, I mean, every time I go out there and the water's low, I mean, I would not bullshit you that you could walk out there and find thousands of leadhead just jigs out there. I mean, they're just, I mean, but it's one of those situations, and the point I was trying to get at is like, we want to do the best we can, but like stuff happens. You get snagged on things. Things happen. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of like fishermen aren't intentionally launching lead out because like fishing equipment is expensive. You're not trying to lose it on purpose. So you have to like find a balance, and I'm like tungsten is a good alternative, I would assume, to lead for fishing, but it's also extremely expensive compared. You can buy. I just bought like 4 tungsten drop shot sinkers yesterday at the store, and it was like $6, whereas a package of lead ones was probably like 2. So it's like, you got to make those trade-offs. But I think it's just being aware is very important because none of us are perfect. We can't all do everything that like possible to be the perfect outdoors environmentalist conservation. It's like it is physically impossible. But on that point, I think it's something I'm going to have to learn more about myself, and I'm never afraid to admit that I'm wrong because I'm wrong a lot.
We all are.
But, it's just part of the learning process. That's what I do. I learn. I try and learn. And, you brought up a point earlier about, becoming informed and reading about conservation, and I'm in this rabbit hole. I am back in the matrix of it all. I'm going down the tunnel, and, I'm reading about the North American model of conservation. I'm trying to understand more about like laws and, protections that are being kind of people are trying to do away with, and keeping up on the literature. And it's tough. There's a lot going on all the time. And so what kind of areas do you really like to learn about and focus on? I mean, as a Michigan resident, there's getting the MUCC newsletters and stuff. I'm just like, whoa, man, what are we doing right is the question. So what are some focuses that you really kind of, on your end, you only have a capacity for so much. So what are the things you really like to learn about and put your efforts into? So,
it took a long time because I was just drinking from the fire hose at the very beginning. It's just like information just hitting you from every angle about every issue. And there's so much. But I do try to get I try to siphon sources that come from both sides or all sides. I don't want to say both sides because there's really more than two, but I try to get some hook and bullet newsletters, and I try to get, I have like the Sierra Club and the, local Audubon newsletters so that I really can get that like overall perspective of where folks are coming from who care about the environment, because we all care about the environment. We just have different ways of going about it, right?
Yes.
Sometimes they conflict. But with my connection with food, it became really, really important for me to learn about water quality and land availability. So like land that's protected through land conservancies, through parks, through even just like public lands that I can hunt on, fish on, even land that's preserved for logging purposes, as long as it's accessible to the wildlife and conservation mindsets are being put onto it. It's development that, anti-development, I guess, is really where the focus is. So like land that's available to be used as good habitat and high quality water are the things that really became important to me. And the land piece brings up all the funding questions. That's where I get really into the like wonky policy stuff. Like, where's the money coming from? How can we get more of it?
Yeah. The age old question.
Yeah. The water thing is honestly something that is a little heartbreaking. We're on the
little heartbreaking.
Just a little bit. Like super dark about this. I'm on the Huron River here, and we fished a lot the summer right before they told us we couldn't eat the fish anymore. And we ate a lot of those fish all summer. And they were like, you have PFAS in your river so bad that you should not be eating these fish. And we actually had to go in our freezer and get rid of some fish, and it was pretty heartbreaking. And I honestly I've tried to do some catch and release fishing, but my heart just isn't in it. I would rather go for a walk, by the river, than have to constantly be thinking about the fact that I can't eat these fish that I'm catching. Yeah. But because of that, I got really, really in the weeds with the policy around how do we limit these chemicals? How do we find out not just how to get them out of the drinking water, but how to get them out of the surface water so that the fish aren't constantly in contact with them. And, we had even a do not eat advisory for deer in one portion of Michigan because they were getting into the PFAS through the water up in Clark's Marsh. So it's, it got pretty intense. And so that's my big water and land are my big things. Yeah.
To get into this stuff, I'm learning very rapidly. You kind of have to be pretty stout and able to step back sometimes and just not think about it for a little bit, because you'll go insane. You will literally drive yourself nuts because you just worry so much. It's like, I don't know, it's like finding out someone you love has cancer. You're like, what the heck? Like, why are we not doing anything about this? And then everybody around you is like, oh, I'm sorry, but it doesn't affect me, so I don't really care. And you're just like, how do you not care about this? This is literally affecting every one of us it's such a strange thing to but sometimes you do need to detach, I find, because if you dwell on it. But I think being informed is important because we live in a society where we kind of like shove stuff to the side and we don't want to focus on hard things. And I really admire people like you who are just like, we're just people out here doing stuff, and anyone can make change. Like that's the really important message, is like, you don't have to be a PhD in ecology to understand and advocate for this. You can be a guy who runs a podcast, or you can be a person who is a recreation specialist, or you still can be a PhD in ecology, but we all need to work together. And it's really, we're only going to make change that way. And that's why joining organizations is so important, because something like MUCC has some serious pull and leverage to be able to make a change. And it's like someone like you can go to them and be like, I have an idea, and they'll listen to you because we're on the same team. Well, speaking of, I hear you like to raise a little hell now and then. That's the vibe I was getting from some people that I know.
Nick.
What's that all about? Yeah. Let's hear it. Let's raise some hell.
Yeah. So like I said, I like to get information from every angle. I don't really sit well with any one group. So you had said earlier, you're kind of a loner. And when I first got into hunting, I think I felt that way. I was like, not sure that I could integrate into this community. This culture is a little bit different than what I was sort of brought up in and what I sort of come from. A little bit more on the tree hugger side, so a little bit more granola in my origins. But I really think that if we could find the places that we agree, right? Like clean water and preserved land, then we could really, really do something amazing. We could build bridges. We could really but it's hard because the places where we disagree really get people riled up. And to me, I think that we need to use our brains and read about information, learn about information, and not just take the side of our team, whatever that team is, whether it's red, blue teams, whether it's like, shirts and skins. I don't care whose team you're on. I think that we should find the things we agree about and we should dig into those and try to solve those problems. And so that does tend to rile up people. I tend to be on the wrong side of an issue no matter what room I'm sitting in. Because I'm like, yeah, but what does the animal think is what I want to know. Well, what do the deer need?
I'm of a similar mindset too. I mean, I try not to get myself riled up and be a little more stoic about these issues because it's not like when you get pissed off, it just doesn't help anyone. You're just not able to and it's hard to stay a level on situations of stuff you care about a lot. So I try my best to do that. But like when I talk to a lot of my friends who are the granola type, they're very adamant about not hunting. And they're like, I understand it. You love animals. I totally get it. Totally understand. I love animals too. We just have a different way that we love them, and it's different. Like I care about deer a lot. I care about animals a lot. I also will kill them and eat them because it's who I also value my food and getting nice, good, healthy food. And the thing I find that the line for a lot of people is the death part of it. The death is the line in the sand for the granola side of things. We'll just say the granola team. Like that's the line in the sand for a lot of people. And it's like, I understand that. I totally get it. If that's not for you, I would never be like, you need to go hunting with me and try it yourself. I get it. Totally get it.
Right.
The other side of it is like, but what are you doing on your side besides buying clothes at REI? Like where are you, if you care this much, then, and this, I guess it is a jab. I don't know. I don't care. Like if you're going to have an argument against it and you're not going to take an action with it, then there's not really an argument in my mind. Like, cause like even as a hunter or a fisherman, passively, you are participating in conservation just because of how conservation in America is set up. It's like conservation set up. The American model is funded literally through the sale of firearm ammunition, all this stuff. So like, I'm not saying that a hunter is by proxy like more morally sound. It's like they're actively just doing something whether they know it or not. Whereas like, okay, if you're giving money to an organization or giving volunteer time to an organization, and if you're on the granola side of things, that's cool. We've met in the middle. We're all doing something. Congrats. I just have it's not nature in general. I just have a hard time with people who complain and don't do anything in my life. Yeah. So I think that's always my argument. It's like you can hate this and that side of it and love it and all you want, but like do something about it. Like I know people who are on that side and they make documentaries and they do a ton of conservation work on their free time. I'm like, that's so awesome. We don't have to agree on hunting. We don't even have to talk about it. That's totally fine, but you're doing something. Do you like, am I off base? Cause if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Like I know that like I say shit that's off the wall a lot of the times, but like, that's how I feel personally.
You're right. I think I would just go a step farther, and this might ruffle some feathers. So here we go.
Bring it. I love ruffling feathers. Let's do it.
At the end of the day, if you do something that makes you feel good, that's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough. So, I mean, I think what hunters are doing by buying ammunition and firearms and licenses, because that's also part of how the funding model works, is something. But it's similar to paying dues to a land conservancy that's buying land. And that's something, right? And that's good. But if you really care, like if you're fired up enough to be yelling at people who are doing it the wrong way, whatever way that is, like because they're hunting or because they're not hunting, then what I would say is, why aren't you fighting to have legislation for real funding, like constant funding? Like, I don't know, I've heard talk about backpack or binocular tax or whatever, but maybe we just need an income tax. So because everybody's benefiting from the conservation of lands and the protection of waters. So maybe everybody should be paying for it. Even if you don't go out and use it, those ecosystem services are protecting the city. Your city is less likely to flood if you have really viable wetlands outside the city limits. Like, even if you don't take advantage of it, you're going to benefit if they're protected. So maybe that's what we need to do, is argue to really fund it from a base level. And if we really care, actually writing a letter or making a phone call or sending an email or showing up at a representative's office. I mean, it can be as simple as writing an email, which really isn't that big of a deal. But if you really, really put your opinion on the line and give it to your representative, whose job is to represent your opinion, then that's really
it's
like
in the title.
Pushing it. Yes, it's in the job description. That's pushing that forward to sort of hopefully get us really moving to conserve.
I don't know. I don't even know why that's a controversial topic. Get out of here with that. People are in just weird, man. Like nobody is going to hurt from conserving land or animals. Like, we're all going to do a lot better for it.
It's the money. Money's the hard one.
It's always the money. And I think, that was a very good point. I would agree with that. I mean, we're already paying $1 billion trillion taxes. What's one more to make sure the planet's in better shape? I mean, bring it on. Sue me. I don't, whatever. Yeah, that's the I don't like arguing about it with people though, because like sometimes it's like arguing with a brick wall. I'd rather just do something and take action rather than worry about like my feelings or their feelings a lot of the time too. Cause it's like, you can be as mad as you want, but like, which one of us is doing something? That's the end game for me, is like doing, not complaining. So, I mean, that's why I'm going down this rabbit hole and talking to people like you, because I want to know what I can do more. Like, just talking on the internet isn't enough, like I can help change people's opinions and get them informed by people who really understand it a lot better than me. But at the end of the day, like, what can I do on my own to like make it better? So I'm trying to really understand personally, like the legislation side of stuff. And it's very, like you said, I'm drinking from the fire hose right now. And it's like, what's bullshit, what's real, what's, and the approach you take with understanding everything from a lot of perspectives is very important. That's why I don't only talk to people who hunt on this podcast. I have people from tons of different organizations, land conservancies, everything that has to do with protecting everything that we care about. And that's why it's so, like, I'd love to be proven wrong and just like say like, hey, you're an idiot. Like, this is not right. But I don't feel like I'm on that course. So what advice do you have for people maybe who are timid and wouldn't be the kind of person to reach out to a representative? Like, it seems overwhelming for a lot of people because a lot of people are terrified of the government, but they don't realize like they do work for us. Like, we pay their checks. Yeah. So
I would say start small. Start with an organization that you really trust, and they'll do action alerts, right? So like, if you are on more of a granola speed and you get on the Sierra Club website and look at their action alerts, or if you want to have a balanced approach and you go to National Wildlife Federation and see what's on their action alerts, or if you are more hook and bullet, you go to like MUCC or your state's, organization and get on their action alerts, and they'll have a pre-filled out thing that you just put in your name and your address, and it'll figure out which representative to send it to, and you push send. And then go and learn about the issue. Maybe even learn about the issue before you send it, right?
Generally,
if
a
it
good
seems like
practice.
something you're interested in, go and learn about it and send that little, but you don't have to. If you trust the organization and what they're saying about this piece of legislation seems right to you, send it. But then learn a little bit more and then just keep chipping away at it. You'll think about the things that you really care about, right? Think about the river that you kayak on. Think about the hiking trails where you hike. What do you think to yourself? God, I wish somebody would whatever. Or I'm really glad that this is like this. And then find out why. Find out what keeps it good or what needs to happen to change it. And then start looking into who you would have to contact to make a change. But that's sort of like second level step. You can just start by doing those little action alerts and learning about those topics. And before you know it, you'll have things that you get really fired up about. And you write yourself like essentially a research paper, and then you've got to whittle it down into an email or, a letter to your representative. And it can happen, but I don't think it can happen overnight. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be like, I have a dissertation on why I think cormorants should or shouldn't be hunted, But it happened slowly, where you get excited about something and then you build.
Yeah, I'm to the point now where I get excited to read these like boring ass, dry books. Like I'm literally reading a book called The North American Model of Conservation right now. And it is one of the most interesting and boring books I've ever read all at the same time. And I love every minute of it. I'm one of those people that like has to, when I read, I take notes, and it takes me so freaking long to read because I'm like a terrible note taker apparently because I write down too much, but it cements it in my brain. It really does. And like, you don't have to do that. You can go to organizations and they can disseminate the information a little better, or become friends with people like you who love doing this stuff and are nerded out by policy and stuff. And it's a great resource to have. And, that's essentially mentorship, so that's really important too in the outdoors community. But I really want to wrap up here. It's been an hour already. It's flown by, but I want to thank you for everything that you're doing. I mean, I think it's really important, and I'm glad there's people out there like you who are taking part in this stuff. And is there any kind of closing words you'd like to let people know about anything, conservation, ethics stuff? And then, if you want any social media plugs that you might want to let people know where to find you.
Okay. Ooh. I didn't really have a pitch prepared, so
you could just say no.
My main call to action is to get outside. Like, whatever you're doing, like stop what you're doing for a little bit after you're done with the podcast, of course, and then get outside, or get outside while you're listening to the podcast. I don't care.
Shut the podcast off and go outside. You already listened to 99% of it anyway. Go outside.
Yeah. And I could list like a million different things that I think people could dig into, but that's too much. I personally am active on Instagram and Facebook as Taproot. I think it's Taproot_Wildcraft. Yeah, there's an underscore in there.
I'll put it in the link in stuff below. So
okay. Okay, Taproot Wildcraft. And I link all of the organizations that I'm connected to in my bio, because I feel like it's important for people to be able to follow those little rabbit holes wherever they want to go. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm glad we had this conversation. I learned a lot from you. So that's always a good thing for me.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you.
All right.